"The thing is," Mel said to me one afternoon, "you can never really chase evil away. You can't chase it away because the darkness is always there. Even when you think it's gone, whenever you shine a light and think that you've chased it away, you've deceived it because the brighter lights cast the deepest shadows. It's always there, in the tiniest nooks and crannies, the racks and small spaces that the light doesn't quite fill. Evil always persists because it lives in the dark between." It was a strange and rather macabre statement to hear coming from anyone. It was particularly strange to hear it coming from Mel, sitting as he was in my kitchen at 3 a.m. still dressed in the tailored chimp costume he wore for his job at Chalky Chimp's jungle gym and soft play center. As he said, I could help picturing the place. At 3 p.m. in the afternoon, with the sunlight streaming in through the windows that lined the top of the building, Chalky seemed about as far away from things like darkness and evil as it was possible to be. Here, everything was light. Bright and almost garishly lurid colors covered every surface and every crash mat. Padded ladders and climbing frames were coated in fixed insulation of multicolored vinyl. The ball pits full of hollow plastic balls were swimming pools full of rainbows, and every painted surface beamed with the explosion of laughter and color. This was Chalky Chimp's jungle gym, an almost oppressively jolly place where the only hint of a negative emotion was in the back room each Friday when myself, Mel, and the others opened our pay packets to find they decidedly lacked in contents. The Chalky Chimp's play area had been on this site in Morton, inside an old Victorian-era building for the better part of 2 decades, and had always been a popular venue and a profitable business venture. The owners, Carol and Mike, had bought the old building at a steal, ripping out the old interiors and constructed the climbing frames and jungle gyms themselves over the course of 2 years, covering every possible sharp angle with padding and mats so that even the most adventurous kids could tear around the place at top speed and run little risk of hurting themselves. I'd been working at Chalky's accommodating kids' parties of screaming toddlers and serving the general public, who were allowed in every Wednesday and Friday, for almost a year when Mel joined the team. The job itself was fairly simple. Prepare the food for the kids' parties, liaise with the parents before and after, and supervise the kids throwing themselves over cargo nets and bouncy castles for the 3 to 4 hour duration of the parties. Then clean up. Most shifts involved 2 workers. One who would meet and greet the parent punters, make sure every kid got a slice of birthday cake, and be generally smiley. The other would be in the suit. Part of the job, and one that none of us particularly enjoyed, was actually being Chalky the Chimp. One of us would have to dress up in that natty, moth-eaten chimp suit that was apparently older than both the jungle gym and even the building, whilst pretending to be a friendly ape. We all hated that suit, inside of which smelled like a mix of sweat and eggs. But more than that, we hated being in it when there were kids around. While simply wearing a costume and playing with the kids might not sound so bad, you must consider that the kids love to kick the crap out of the furry character, and those that don't like to at least jump up and down on them. If you go into the jungle gym dressed as Chalky, you are leaving with the same number of cuts and bruises you'd get in your average rugby or boxing match. It's not an easy gig. More often than not, it was Mel in the suit. Melvin Thomas, who always joked that he had a first name for a last and vice versa, joined Chalky Chimps in late September and had moved to Morton the previous summer. He and I had met at a few house parties, but only became firm friends once we worked together. It was only after about 6 months and during the middle of a cleaning night that Mel started getting weird on me. It had always been an urban myth for as long as I'd lived in Morton that the ball pit at Chalky's had some kind of threatening object hidden in there. Sometimes it was broken glass, sometimes razor blades, and sometimes syringes, depending upon who was telling the story. The idea behind the myth, of course, being that the unsuspecting kids would dive into the ball pit, filled with plastic balls, and inadvertently injure themselves on these hidden terrors. An interesting spin on the razor blades and the apples, or poison in the Halloween candy mess. In every case, it was nonsense. But that didn't stop the ball pit from being something of a hazard. Think about it. 50 kids, many of them with questionable hygiene and a few of them hardly toilet trained, leaping about touching the balls for over an hour. The entire thing was a massive bacteria breeding ground. We never found sharp objects in there, but we definitely found all kinds of disgusting body fluids and worse in there. As such, it was one of our jobs once a week to completely empty the ball pit and clean the balls. A laborious and boring job, but one that was necessary to protect our and the children's health. We had just started on cleaning one night after closing. Mel was collecting the balls into a big canvas bag ready to be washed, and I was tidying up the party plates and getting ready to sweep up when Mel started screaming, bawling and screeching in a way that made me think he might have slipped on one of those mats and broke an ankle or something. Running over to see what the matter was, I found him with his arms outstretched, his back pressed against the netted wall of the ball pit, staring down at them in abject terror. When I asked him what happened, he simply walked out of the pit, around me, and out the door, leaving me not only to do the ball cleanup on my own, but also the rest of the cleanup. "Yeah, thanks, mate. I'll do all this on my bleeding own, shall I?" I screamed after him, but there was no question of him slowing down. Within seconds, his back, which I had been screaming and protesting at as he sprinted away, shrank into a blurred dot on the horizon and was gone. So I finished the job, angry and alone. Later that night, in the early hours of the morning, there was a knock at the door of my house. Opening the door, I found Mel, blind drunk, shivering and still wearing the Chalky Chimp suit, standing on the doorstep. I invited him in, poured him a stupidly strong coffee in an attempt to sober him up, and sat him down at the kitchen table. It was at this point that he began his ramblings about the things lurking in the dark between. At first, I put the insensible slurrings down to the alcohol, but gradually his words coalesced into a straightforward story. Today, when I was cleaning the ball pit, I was messing around and just jumped in for a minute. My idea was to cover myself over with a layer of balls, to hide underneath until you wondered where I was, and then when you came back to check, jump out on you. This was a trick that Mel often pulled whilst dressed as Chalky the Chimp and playing with the kids to surprise them. I doubted it would have worked on me, and said so, explaining that I would have been able to see the bits of him through the spaces between the balls. That's it though. Don't you get it? Even when there's nobody there, when the pit is empty, it isn't empty, because the dark's still there, between the balls, in the spaces. No matter how colorful they make them, there's always dark between. At this point, I was seriously considering calling for a doctor, reasoning that Mel had lost his grip on reality. I began explaining to him that I might have to do this when he began stripping out of the Chalky Chimp outfit. As he did, he thrust out his arm. Around the wrist was a series of deep bruises, as if he'd been gripped and held for a long time by someone of considerable strength. It wasn't unusual to come out of a shift bruised by the kids, but this was different. I'd never seen any marks like that before. Further up the arm, on the soft flesh of the tricep above the elbow, was the unmistakable oval-shaped impression made by teeth, staining the flesh in purples and reds where the blood vessels had been burst by the pinch. Bite marks. "When I tried to hide in there today," said Mel, his voice quivering on the edge of tears, "there was someone else in there," he said flatly. "I covered myself in balls, dug my way toward the bottom, and lay still, but then..." He paused and took a deep, steadying breath. "Then I felt something. Someone grabbed me, and a hand clasped over my mouth. I couldn't scream, and when I tried to move these, I don't know. Hands, loads of them, just seemed to grab me and started pulling me, dragging me down. I kept kicking, but I could feel myself going under, like I was sinking in the surface. The first layer of colors was getting further and further away." I stared at him, watched his lips quivering as he spoke and knew, almost in an instant, that he was telling the truth. "I was so scared, mate. So scared. I'm so sorry I left you in there. I couldn't." He pushed his arm back inside the furry sleeve of the suit and shook his head. "I went from you straight to the pub. I drank more than I should, but I just needed to get my head straight to think. The only thing that kept going over and over in my head was, what if we lost one? What if all the kids jumped into the ball pit and then just one just wasn't there? Like they went under the surface and something pulled them and kept them. How the hell do you explain that to parents? 1 minute they're there, the next they're vanished. I don't think I could live with myself." I liked my job at Chalky Chimps, but the following day I handed in my notice. I never set foot in the place since. Mel and I are still friends, but we rarely talk about our time at the jungle gym. Both of us quitting on the same day left the owners, Carol and Mike, in a bit of a dilemma, and they had to close for a week before they could restaff the place properly. In the interim, we sent an anonymous letter to them explaining what might be lurking in their ball pit. When that didn't work, we sent similar anonymous letters to the environmental health about how disgusting the place was, and to the local papers about rats getting into the foam padding and peeing everywhere. Both letters succeeded in getting the place closed for a fortnight in total. Then the pandemic hit, and it has been closed since. I'm told that the premises have been sold to new owners and the place renamed in preparation for reopening later this month. I sure as hell hope that when the new owners clean the ball pit, they also look for the dark between.